David Ward and Louise Garner are part of the Northern Opera Group. They came to speak to me about opera, their love of opera, explained to me a lot about what it is and challenged a lot of my preconceptions about it. They've recently celebrated their 5th anniversary. They tell me about the sounds amazing hybrid opera festival that they had that we can still go along and have a look at if you look at the links in the podcast. But yeah, they were fantastic, and they've made me think I'm definitely going to make a massive effort to go and see some opera. So do have a listen. On this episode of Corona Bloody Virus Extraordinary Episodes of Light on Leeds, I have got with me two guests today, David Ward and Louise Garner from Northern Opera Group. Hello, both.
Hello.
Hello.
Very nice of you to come along in spirit and speak to me.
Well, we're doing everything online at the moment, so yeah.
Getting used to it, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. Yeah, it's such a strange time.
Online things.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, nice to see you, but can't see you.
Yeah, one of these days we'll get to see each other in real life. I've got a whole list of people now that I can't wait to see in real life. And so you both work with or for the Northern Opera Group?
Yeah, so it's a charity community opera group that we set up 5 years ago. I guess you could say we work for Northern Opera Group, but we don't pay ourselves. It's a labour of love. So yeah, we work for Northern Opera Group, but we founded it as well.
And how did you both get into opera in the first place?
Well, I did see a couple of operas at university, but I must say they weren't really quite my thing. So it's definitely not been a lifelong passion. When Louise came up to Leeds for university, and she joined the Opera Society at the university.
We needed men.
Yeah, so I got dragged into sing and help. I was a willing participant, and I think for both of us, it wasn't actually watching opera that got us into it. It was taking part. It was actually being on the stage, getting to know the music, singing the music, and that was really what it was for us. And we did that with the university and with Leeds Youth Opera here in the city as well for a couple of years. And then when we sort of got to an age where we thought we were a bit old for the youth opera, so we were looking at kind of continuing it on really, but there was no opportunity in Leeds to perform in opera if you were an adult amateur. And with Opera North in the city and so many choral societies and whatnot, it seemed silly that there wasn't that kind of provision. So we originally thought that we would start a company that was for adult amateurs to perform in opera. Mm-hmm. The more we thought about it, the more we thought, if there's something that's going to take over our evenings and weekends and lunch times and whatnot, actually what is something that would keep us really interested and really engaged with the company, and what actually is something that would not only benefit amateurs, but that could benefit professional artists, that could benefit audiences, something that wasn't there kind of on the market. And so what we decided Northern Opera Group does as its central mission is to perform operas outside of the main repertoire. Opera companies, big and small, tend to focus on the same operas: your Carmens, La Bohèmes, Madame Butterflies, Marriage of Figaro's, great operas. But it means as an audience member, you've seen those operas 100 times.
Yeah, I mean, we're not that old, and I think I've seen Così fan tutte about 7 times and Marriage of Figaro 10 times. And, it's love, it's all great music. And I'm sure, there'll probably be people shouting at me over the no, that's my favourite opera. But it's there's so much more out there. Why don't we try and showcase some of that stuff? And some of that stuff's really great. So yeah,
so for audiences, it's about giving them something that they haven't seen before, they can't see anywhere else. For artists, it's the same. They have to sing the same roles hundreds and hundreds of times. So we give them the opportunity to perform something different, something they haven't been able to perform before. And then for the amateur performers, amateur performance is still a huge part of what we do. It means that we can actually pick works that work for amateur singers. The few amateur opera companies that are out there tend to do those same big operas I was talking about before, mm-hmm. which a lot of the time are just not suitable for untrained singers. Mm-hmm. You should not be trying to belt out a big old Verdi opera if you don't have a singing background. So we can find shorter works, smaller works that really do suit singers that might not have that training experience. So by kind of focusing on stuff outside of those main operas, we can really find things that work for audiences, artists, and the amateur performers.
Yeah.
And where do you find those other operas then? I don't know hardly anything about opera, you must forgive me. It's all a big learning curve for me talking to you now. But where would you find these other operas that are not like the big famous names?
So a lot of my job, and probably my favourite part of the job of being the artistic director, is scrolling through the internet, scrolling through libraries. There's an amazing website called IMSLP, which any musician will know about, which is a repository of thousands and thousands of music scores. And I just go down these sort of Google rabbit holes, really.
He always sort of goes away for a bit and then goes, do you know what I found? And I know that there's an idea coming through.
Yeah. And I find a score sounds interesting. I'll sit there at the piano. So for example, with the amateur operas I was talking about, we like to find things that work for singers and that are good for family audiences as well. We get all ages of people taking part, and therefore you've got granddads and grandmas, you've got grandchildren coming to the operas. So I started out, looking for fairy tale operas. And so a couple of years ago, we put on a version of Cinderella, which was by a French composer called Pauline Viardot. Hasn't been done in the UK ever, but we put that on. Similarly, we're looking at one for the future, which is a version of Sleeping Beauty.
Wow.
So you kind of find these subjects and dig deeper. Similarly, Shakespeare's 400th anniversary of his death, 2016. So I was looking at all of the Shakespeare operas out there. We found a version of Much Ado About Nothing, which is just
amazing,
tremendous, which we did part of in 2016 and the full thing last year. So sometimes it's a blind search, sometimes it's a targeted trawl. I love it. I love finding things off the beaten track. So it's a great joy.
And so did you both have a singing background in the first place?
So I definitely did. I joined my church choir when I was about 6 years old, and always sang, but it was never opera. It was always, church music. I did have singing lessons, but again, it tended to be kind of popular stuff, really, more than kind of, opera. And again, I hadn't really seen much opera until I came to university, and I'd always been part of shows and musical theatre performances, because at school, I think, especially the schools that I went to, that they did keep that musical theatre thing going, but no one ever really mentioned opera, and everyone just thought, oh, opera, boring, too hard, too long, all of those misconceptions. And so when I came to university, I thought, I'll join the Musical Theatre Society because I've done that before and I know what that means. And then they told me I had to do a dance audition. And I said, no way in hell are you getting me to do a dance audition? I can't dance. And thankfully, someone who was on the Opera Society stall looked at me, looking horrified at the fact that they had a dance audition, and said, come and join Opera Soc. We don't even audition you to sing. And I was like, excellent, I'll join that. And then I never looked back, and as I say, I dragged David along. But yeah, David didn't really have much of a singing.
No, as Louise will testify, I sing around the house
all the time,
constantly, but I'm not a singer. I do have a classical music background, a clarinetist and a pianist. But similar to Louise, I mean, I didn't see an opera until I was at university. It was never something that was ever mentioned at school. My parents are not musical in any way, shape, or form, and I'm from Hull, so again, not somewhere with a lot of opera going on. So no, it's completely foreign to me. But we are both musical.
Yes.
So that's kind of the way in.
So for somebody like myself who doesn't know a great deal about opera at all, how would you describe opera as a form, and how would you convince people to go along and get involved?
How would you describe it, Hazel?
The little that I know about it, one of the things that I've always worried about is that a lot of them are in sort of foreign languages, and so I worry that I wouldn't be able to follow the story so much. But they always, to me, I imagine them as just being like really dramatic, like a really dramatic story, dramatic music. There's obviously, you sort of hear, everybody knows sort of Pavarotti and people like that, and their voices. But yeah, I don't know an awful lot about it at all. That's about as far as I could go, really.
Well, for me, opera is music theatre. There is very little difference between a musical and an opera. Yeah, sure, the musical styles might be different. But, opera started in about 1560, and we're now in 2020. So over that time, there's been quite a lot of different musical styles in opera. It's just a story told through song.
Yeah.
Basically.
So if anyone likes musicals, sort of more of the classic musicals, like Les Mis, for example, that is very, very similar to opera, because there's no talking in Les Mis. It's all what we call through sung, as in there's no there's no dialogue. Everything is set to music. So in a way, it's sometimes weird to think of the distinction between musical theatre and opera as being so large, because it actually probably isn't as big as you think it might be.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the issues potentially with opera, and I was talking to someone about this the other day, is that we don't have a great tradition of writing English language operas. There have always been them, but they tend to be the things that we do. They're the things outside of the normal, of the mainstream.
Yeah.
So I think they did kind of build up this impression in certainly kind of the mid 1900s that opera just wasn't English. It was always foreign. English people didn't write operas. And I think that's always been a problem. You know, there's a reason why opera is still so big in Germany, in Italy, in France. It's because they've always had big hit operas in their own language, which we just never, well, not for a long time, we haven't had here in England. But yeah,
I think if anyone is worried about not being able to understand what's going on in an opera, they will always have what's called surtitles, which are basically subtitles wherever you go in the language. I mean, we even went to an opera in Vienna in Austria, and they had surtitles in English. So even if they were singing in, I don't know what it was German. So you can still understand what's going on. And also, as you say, it is dramatic, or a lot of it is dramatic, and sort of it tends to be that they say things more than once. So if you haven't quite got it the first time, you will definitely understand what's going on, 2 minutes later when they might say the same thing again. And again, they're very sort of easy to follow stories, and if it's got good direction and things like that, it isn't always necessarily about what the person's saying. It's like a pop song. Sometimes maybe a song will give you a feeling, or a bit of a narrative overall arc, but you're not listening to every single word, wanting to know exactly what every single word is.
Yeah.
I think the struggle we have in opera sometimes is that, there's huge pressure on all opera companies to find new audiences and to persuade people that if you go to the opera once, you will love it and you will fall in love with it. The thing is, some operas are rubbish. Yeah. Some productions are rubbish. There are plenty of operas I've seen that I would rather have been at home watching the telly. I think that's the problem.
People group opera as a massive genre that if you like opera, you like all opera. If someone said to me, "Do you want to go and see Midsummer Night's Dream by Benjamin Britten?" I've seen that. No, thank you. It was not for me at all. But if someone says, "Well, do you want to go and see something like a bel canto opera?" that I know that's much more up my street, and that's much more tuneful, and it's much more what I enjoy of it, so I'll go, yes, please. It's not just like opera is one big thing that you must like all of it. You could just say, I only like operas written by Wagner, or you could say I only like operas written by Donizetti, or so it doesn't really matter. You can have a preference within the genre.
Yeah, as I said, I saw a couple of operas at university. Didn't think again about opera until I got roped into singing in one, and now I run an opera company. So if there's proof that it's not, you go and see it once and absolutely love it. There it is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's how it can get you. Well, I've been following, I can't remember, is it Northern Opera? And I get emails from them every now and then, and it's one of those things where I'm like, at the back of my mind, at some point in my life I will go and see an opera, because like you said, Louise, I love musicals and I love theatre, so it seems like a strange thing that I don't know what it is. I mean, maybe, I suppose in my mind I've always sort of, rightly or wrongly, kind of thought of opera as like sort of upper class, and maybe sort of out of my reach, or just out of my sort of awareness of the culture of it and everything.
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, that's something else that gets thrown around a lot, and we talk about it a lot in the podcast we do as well. But basically, it's seen as like this thing you have to dress up for it. The tickets are really expensive. Everyone's got in-jokes about the performances, blah, 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 blah. And in some places, yes, that can happen. If you were to look at something like Glyndebourne, the tickets cost at least 70, 80, 100 pounds. And you do have to dress up. They ask you to put on black tie to come. But that is much more of a kind of like an experience, and that's what they do. But we often go to Opera North and see their shows. If you're under 30, they do a great scheme where you can get £5 tickets, and we just turn up in our jeans and our raincoats. So we're not, it doesn't have to be precious, it doesn't have to be this elitist thing.
Yeah.
But for some reason, and it really frustrates me. I don't know how you feel about it, but sometimes in like adverts on TV or something, it's like an opera singer singing and everything's like chandeliers and fancy champagne and all of it just projects this image, and then people always go, oh, I'm going to the opera, and people go, oh my god, you're going to be there for hours and hours. But the last show we did on Saturday took 40 minutes, so there are so many different things about it, but it seems to have got pigeonholed into this like elitist, expensive, long, boring.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things that kind of has happened, and I think the job of every opera company is to try and push against that by doing things like coming talking to you, by all of the things that we've just had in our festival. Everything was online, everything was free. We did performances in Northern Monk, in Hart, in Sunnybank Mills. We did it outside in Merrion Street Gardens. So we just have this responsibility to keep pushing this message, and as much as possible, just to get the music and opera in front of people. If opera companies just trap themselves in their opera houses and just keep doing the same things they've always done, which
for the same people,
yes. Which especially now, in this, I don't want to call it post-COVID, but we're just sort of starting to re-engage again. There's a huge worry that people will just go back to the stuff that they know.
Yeah.
Ways of doing things. It'll be the safe place, and now is absolutely not the time to do that. Now is the time to really push out of that, and show people that it can be so much more than what they thought it was.
Yeah.
So we get so frustrated, by these stereotypes, but it's our responsibility as opera people to push against them and be really proactive in trying to show.
And what I say to people who haven't come to see anything is do come and see something. Maybe come and see something that's a little bit different, and then make up your own minds. But don't just dismiss it out of hand, because I think a lot of people just dismiss it out of hand, and that really frustrates me. Especially when there's so many other things that will go in this day and age. I feel like so many people go and try all sorts of different things, don't they? And just try it. It's not gonna hurt.
I'll definitely be doing some searching and having a look and seeing if I can find out a little bit more on my own, and also on your website. And so you were talking just recently. You had, was it last week? You had a hybrid opera festival.
Yeah. It was a new one for us. So we've been doing the Leeds Opera Festival for 4 years, and this was going to be our biggest yet before COVID hit, and it's actually turned out to be I'd say biggest in terms of how much money it would cost to put on, and now it actually has turned into our biggest one yet because of the amount of stuff that we did.
Excellent. Was it very difficult so you were planning all of this for a non-COVID world, and then have you had to adapt everything you were doing very quickly?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, we've been planning this year's festival for well over a year. And actually, we're talking to our director the other day. We've been talking about some of the shows for about 3 years. Yeah. So it's been a long time. But it was clear when COVID kind of struck in March that we could either hang on and it still wasn't going to happen anyway, or we could just kind of mothball it. So what we decided to do very early on was say what we were going to do in 2020, we're going to do it in 2021 instead. So we can still see the shows we were planning, but it's just going to be the next year. So knowing what was happening with coronavirus, we started to plan a completely new festival, basically, which was going to, be able to exist in this COVID world. So lots of things online or lots of events outdoors with socially distanced audiences. And all of the events in this year's festival themed around an ongoing project that we're doing called the Leeds Opera Story, which is all about the hidden 300-year history of opera in the city.
Wow.
We quickly devised this new program, which in the end actually had 7 live events in front of real people, performances, concert, pop-up events, and then 12 events online. And again, to help get people re-engaged with culture, to help encourage new people to get involved with opera, everything in this year's festival was free, which isn't always the case. Sadly, we can't always do that. But this year we said, look, let's just offer the broadest program we can to as many people as possible. And so it was challenging from a technological and social distancing, dealing with Leeds City Council risk assessment sort of point of view, but we got there, and we did 5 days, 19 events. Well over 4,000 people have now tuned into things. So it was going to be our biggest cost festival. In fact, it's actually our lowest cost festival we've ever done, but has reached the most number of people.
Wow,
because
that's amazing.
Stuff has been online.
And did you get lots of good feedback from that?
Yes, it's been really wonderful. I mean, I think a lot of people were delighted to be able to go back to a live performance. For most people, this is the first live event they've been to since March.
Yeah.
Performing in Merrion Street Garden, taking it to, I said, places like Northern Monk and Seven Arts and Hart and the Tetley was fantastic. And then again, the online program, what has been so amazing about that is not only have we been able to get viewers from all over the world to tune into our events, but we've been able to have contributors from Philadelphia, Copenhagen, Glasgow, Penzance, London for those events, which, if we had it in Leeds, there's no way we could fly someone in from Philadelphia to do an event with us.
Yeah.
But because it's online, it's opened up a whole new world of people that we can work with and do events with. So COVID has been difficult in some respects, but it's also made us think differently, and in a way kind of think, why did we not always do things like this? So it's been difficult, but actually a very, very positive experience.
Oh, I'm really glad to hear it. And so you have plans for next year, but obviously it's all very much wait and see, isn't it, at the minute?
Yeah, it is. I mean, we did at the very end of this year's festival announce what those plans are for next year, which is a festival themed around the operas of Gustav Holst, who was an English composer.
He's best known for the planets.
Yeah, I know the planets. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, he wrote opera as well.
Wow.
Yeah, very, 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 very different operas. So we're hoping to do 3 of his operas next year. At the Boar's Head, which is a Shakespeare opera, Savitri, which is based on an Indian Sanskrit epic, and we're going to be working with South Asian Arts here in the city to commission a South Asian composer to write a short piece kind of in response to that. And then also a 20-minute opera of his called The Wandering Scholar, which will tour hopefully to 12 different venues.
And we're actually going outside of West Yorkshire for the first time.
Yeah, so 8 venues in Leeds, 4 venues across the north of England. So again, what we want to do is we've been able to put this festival on this year, and look, we've got big, bold plans for the future. Again, it's really difficult, COVID, but my response always is be proactive, be positive, just kind of try and get people on board with your plans, get people excited about what it is that you want to do.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect approach. And you mentioned that you have a podcast.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing that?
Oh gosh, a year and a half now. We started in January 2019. David hosts the podcast. We've had some really, really amazing guests on, and they're people that are kind of quite well known in the opera world, but if I say their names, you might not know who they are. But Gerald Finlay, Elizabeth Llewellyn, and we've had relationships with Scottish Opera and the Royal Opera House, where they've asked us to come in and record bits and bobs with them. So yeah, if you want to, it is quite nerdy, I'm not going to lie. It's not kind of like a real general interest opera podcast, but we do just go through the news of what's happening in the opera world. So we've been a bit light on content, let's say that, for, over COVID. We're sort of starting that back up again, aren't we? We do monthly episodes, and we had, just before COVID hit, decided to go to 2 a month, but we'll have to see how that pans out, because a lot of the extra one we were doing a month was like an on location one,
right?
So we're supposed to be going to the International Opera Awards and doing something from there, but obviously those have been postponed. We did go to Glyndebourne just before the pandemic, a week before the pandemic.
Wow.
Went to Glyndebourne to cover their Opera Cup, which is a singing competition. So that was kind of the last live event that I went to, and that wasn't ours. Obviously, I've been to ours. So yeah, we're ramping it up again, but we're again it's something to just help people to maybe get a bit more of an insight into the opera world, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main reason for starting the podcast, it kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier, Hazel, about the impression that people have of opera as it being for a certain kind of group of people. And one of the big problems is that, opera doesn't receive coverage on the television or really the radio. Just a very small coterie of people that basically talk about opera and get to decide what people hear about opera. And they tend to be a similar sort of person, a nice sort of old white middle class man without putting too fine a point in it.
Yeah.
And so the idea of the podcast is to just open up who talks about it. So you have me hosting, who's a proud Northern gentleman. We have a wide array of guests on the podcast. It's about saying, look, even if you don't know much about opera, even if you don't know how to pronounce all the names, and I pronounce so many things incorrectly.
I think my favourite one was Sorothabal.
You just throw yourself in, just have a go. Even if you don't know everything about it, you can still have an opinion. You can still talk about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Operacast is all about. It's generating interest. It's generating debate, and just saying, look, it doesn't have to be those same few people that have always had control over what gets said about opera. Anyone can have a point of view, and that's what's great about podcasts, is it enables people to talk about things, get the content out there, really democratize who can talk about it. And I think that's really what Operacast set out to do, and hopefully has done.
Yeah. And can people listen to that in all the usual places that you'd find podcasts?
All the usual places. So there is a website, operacast.co.uk, but otherwise, iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, Acast, all the usual places.
Yeah, excellent. And also, can people go to your website, and if they're interested in becoming an amateur opera singer, is that something that people can just go along and click through and get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we usually have one amateur production a year, at least one amateur production a year. We're going to have to see how that pans out.
Yeah.
This year.
Yeah, we were supposed to be starting rehearsals for a Christmas production kind of at the end of this month.
Oh, of course.
That won't be happening.
Which is still very tricky. But we hope to do something. So people can pop on the website.
We've got a mailing list.
Yeah, there's a mailing list, and there's contact us details on there. We're very happy to hear from people. And again, if people pop on, see the past productions that we've done. We've got quite a lot of media content on now. We've got a full YouTube channel with all sorts of stuff on, so you can see past things that we've done, get a sense of what it is that we do.
And we really are every ability as well. I know that some people say that and they don't really mean it. We really do.
Oh, good.
We have had people who have never sung before in an opera, and that's absolutely fine. We're not expecting anyone to come along and know how to go about putting on their big projecty voice. That doesn't matter. You can sing in whatever way you want. You don't have to have an operatic voice. And
it's free to take part in as well, which I think is really important, because I think there are lots of amateur choirs and theatre societies and whatnot who sometimes the fees can be quite big for those, and we know that people have costs of you got your parking, you've got your bus, or whatnot. So if you part in one of our shows, it's free to take part. You'll be supported, professional conductor, professional director. So it's about giving people as good an experience as possible.
Yeah, and then we also ask people to normally provide their own costumes, and that's always a bit of fun. Some people get really stuck in. We've had some excellent
We've had some amazing
people come along with their their sewing skills, making this. One of our someone made a cloak with this glitter all over it, black shimmery fabric for our production of Cinderella. Joanne, she was fantastic. People have absolutely loved going through all the charity shops and being like, oh, what can I possibly wear to be a villager in this scene?
That's brilliant. It adds another dimension.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what you don't get from if you do like singing and you do like performing in choral societies and things like that. It's similar-ish music, but you have to stand there in your black outfit with a black folder and follow I've done all that, and it's definitely got a place, and it's definitely very rousing, but it's so much more different to kind of be on a stage and have actions and props and things you've got to remember to do at certain points, and it's so much fun. And everyone who's taken part in our community productions, pretty much everyone's done it at least more than once, so we can't be doing it anything too wrong.
No, people come back. That's a good sign.
Yeah.
So David, you mentioned that you're from Hull originally. Louise, are you originally from Leeds?
I'm not. I don't know if you can tell from my accent.
I suspected.
No, I'm from near the southeast coast, so near Hastings.
Oh, lovely.
But I came up to the University of Leeds for my undergrad degree, and then never left because I love Leeds.
Lovely.
Well.
So how long have you both been here?
Oh God, 10 years.
9 years.
9 years.
So you're perfectly qualified to answer the 3 questions that I always ask guests. The first one being, what would you say is something that is great about the city of Leeds?
Well, the thing I always say is that I'm not sure Leeds is necessarily a great place to visit. It doesn't have the massive attractions, it doesn't have the massive heritage and whatnot, but as a place to live, Leeds is the best. A very compact city centre, tons of amazing restaurants and bars, lots of great culture, low cost of living, a very easy place. I don't drive, so a very easy place to walk around. I just think it's an absolutely fantastic place to live.
I think as well, we've got friends in London and things, and they just go, what goes on in Leeds? And I'm like, are you joking? There's so much. There's often nights where we have to make a decision, what we go and see, because there's too much on. We've done double theatre days. We've had to go and see a matinee and then see an evening performance because the things we wanted to see, we couldn't fit them in. It's not like it's a cultural backwater, which some people think it is.
No, absolutely not. Yeah,
and the only place outside of London to have a full-time opera company,
full-time ballet company,
full-time theatre. It's really quite something that people just don't know about. So, best thing about Leeds is this is a really broad point, but it is just a great place to live.
Yeah.
So that's.
I definitely agree. And if you had to choose something that you think is not so great about the city, what would that be?
Well, again, from my point of view, as someone who walks everywhere, it has to be transport. If you want to get into the city centre, you're all right. But we're here in Burley, just below Headingley, and if I want to get to Roundhay, for example,
bloody nightmare, isn't it?
Absolute nightmare. So that again, I'm sure I'm not the first person to say that.
You're absolutely not. It comes up again and again.
I was going to say, if I had to say one other thing that isn't transport, again, as a walker, I do like, walking around places and seeing them. Leeds has some lovely buildings. It's not the most beautiful place I've ever been to in my entire life. There are quite a number of buildings and sections which I like to just kind of walk past as quickly as possible. But yeah, the main bugbear is the transport, definitely.
My main bugbear is that they only take my green recycling every 4 weeks.
Yeah, that's strange, isn't it?
That really gets me.
Yeah, I fill mine up quite quickly, and I could do with it definitely more often than that.
But some people do. Some other areas of Leeds seem to get it every 2 weeks.
What?
What's that about?
We need to be making some sort of complaints.
What do you mean they only come every 4 weeks? I'm like, they only go every 4 weeks. They get every 2 weeks with me. I'm like, what?
That is not on, is it? We need some sort of equality when it comes to recycling.
Exactly.
And if somebody had been a resident of Leeds for a very long time, would you be able to suggest something to them that you would consider to be a hidden gem that they might never have heard of?
Well, my big thing is whenever I go anywhere, I'm thinking, could this possibly be a performance venue? I'm always thinking about, could I put on an opera here?
Where do I put the conductor?
Yes, I have a big long mental list of places in Leeds that could be great venues. So there is definitely some honourable mentions that I could put out there. I think the one that I would really love to do one day, and I don't know how well known this is, but the Northern School of Contemporary Dance on Chapeltown Road.
Oh, it's a beautiful building, yeah.
And it has an absolutely gorgeous theatre called the Riley Theatre. It's a converted synagogue. And so they've got the original pews in there. It's sort of a horseshoe shape. It's just an absolutely wonderful venue for performance. Sadly, they mainly have student shows in there, so it's almost impossible to find any availability. But if people haven't been there before, you can go on their website and they have a little virtual tour, so you can see what it looks like. But go and see what they've kind of got on in the future. It's just a fantastic venue, and I think that's what Leeds does really well is. Whether it's that on Chapeltown Road, whether it's Chapel FM in Seacroft, whether it's Morley Town Hall, there are just so many wonderful little venues. Interplay Theatre in Armley that we use for rehearsals. This converted church, it's just an absolutely beautiful space. And if you just open your eyes outside the city centre, there are so many wonderful little venues across the city.
Yeah.
But the Riley Theatre at the Northern School of Contemporary Dance, I think, is a really, really special space.
And are you sticking with that as well, Louisa? Have you got a separate one you'd like to mention?
If you, there's the Leeds Library that's in the middle of a shopping street. I don't know if people have gone in there, but there's kind of like another separate little room near the back. And again, I have been in there because we saw an opera in there. But that is a beautiful space, whether or not there's opera going on or not. Loads of leather-bound books around, proper like old school library vibes. I'd say that that's a really beautiful place if no one's ever been in there.
It is, and I think there's heritage walks coming up next week. I think I'm not sure if they've got anything on this year, but I went to a balconies and basements tour last year, and part of that was getting to go inside the Leeds Library, the subscription library, and it's just stunning, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's what when someone thinks of an old school library, that's what kind of comes to mind. It's very sort of Harry Potter-esque.
It absolutely is. That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, people should definitely get along to that. I always ask guests in case they have a track or a song that they'd like featuring, and you have chosen a song by Angela Morley. Would you like to tell me a little bit more about it?
Yeah, well, Leeds actually doesn't have a huge track record of sort of famous composers, certainly not kind of classical composers. But I mentioned earlier, we've been doing this project about the 300-year history of opera in Leeds. The first opera in Leeds was 1729.
Wow.
So it has a long and really, really rich history of opera in the city. Angela Morley isn't that old, but she's an absolutely fascinating character. She was born Walter Scott, so she was born a man in Leeds. And she trained as a musician. She used to be playing a lot of dance bands. She did a lot of arranging for dance bands. And she then eventually moved to the United States. She did a lot of composing for television programs, things like Dynasty. She worked on loads of films, things like Star Wars. She worked on the music for Star Wars.
Home Alone.
Wow. Wonder Woman, Superman. I can't remember exactly when it was she transitioned, but she was the first transgender woman to be nominated for an Oscar for her work on a film. The film escapes me right now. But she's just an astonishing character with an amazing career. She died not that long ago, sort of 10 years or so ago. The song I've chosen today is probably her most famous song as a composer. It was a theme tune to Hancock's Half Hour, which is a little bit before my time, but it's one of those classic sort of radio programs. If someone doesn't make a film about Angela Morley's life, I think they're missing out. Do find out a bit more about her, because she's just an amazing character with one of the most astonishing careers.
Yeah, I'll definitely be looking her up. She sounds fascinating.
Yeah, really interesting lady. Who made a fame and fortune in Hollywood.
Amazing. And what will you both be doing with yourselves for the rest of today?
Gosh, I don't know. There's some cricket on. England are playing Australia in one day.
Excellent.
So a bit of that crossed with a bit of football, crossed with a bit of the British Athletics Championships. So
we have also found a new PlayStation game that we're kind of a little bit obsessed with called Fall Guys.
All right.
And it's basically you're a little person and you get 60 other people and you have it's like a mix between Total Wipeout and Takeshi's Castle.
That sounds brilliant.
So yeah.
Yeah, except I get very stressed.
You get very stressed. I find it funny. And we're going to Wales on Monday, so we'll maybe do a bit of planning for.
Excellent. Well, I hope you have a fantastic time in Wales. Thank you so very much for coming along and talking to me. I will definitely be looking up the links that you sent me that I'll also put in the podcast notes, because opera is something that I'd like to know more about, and I feel like I do know much more about it thanks to you both.
Good.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
What's happening in this great city? We'll tell you. But wait a minute.
I really enjoyed speaking to David Ward and Louise Garner from the Northern Opera Group. Please do check the links in the podcast and have a look at the opera festival that they put on. Get involved if you want to become an amateur opera singer yourself. I think it sounds like a lot of fun, especially the making of the costumes and the various events that they put on. So yeah, go and have a look. The song this week is by Angela Morley, who, if you've listened to the body of the podcast, sounds like an amazing woman with a very amazing career. I'll definitely be looking her up, and it is the theme to Hancock's Half Hour. Enjoy it!